What would you do if the person your company wanted gone was the only one who could reach your child's heart? In a world of boardroom battles and whispered betrayals, one choice will decide not just the future of a corporation, but the shape of a family. And sometimes, the bravest thing isn't walking away, it's staying. Before we dive in, let us know, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below, we'd love to hear from you. The lobby was still half asleep when Evelyn Hart pushed her cleaning cart through the glass doors of Hartwell Dynamics. Outside, Manhattan was waking up fast, honking taxis, hurried footsteps, coffee cups clutched like lifelines. But inside, the air was cool and still, the scent of disinfectant faint but familiar. At 60, Evelyn had the steady pace of someone who had learned not to rush unless there was a fire. Her gray hair was pulled into a low knot, her sneakers worn thin at the heels. She kept her eyes on the marble floor, not on the gleaming offices or the screens flashing numbers she didn't care to understand. Queens was home, a small apartment she shared with her daughter and her grandson, Noah. Life there was simple, quiet dinners, the hum of a fridge, the comfort of routine. Evelyn liked it that way. The city could roar all it wanted. She stayed in her lane. Work was work. Clean what needed cleaning, avoid trouble, and don't get involved in anyone else's business. Especially when it came to children. It wasn't that she disliked them. It was the opposite, really. But getting close meant opening the door to feelings she'd long since learned to keep shut. In a place like Hartwell Dynamics, where people came and went without so much as a nod, it was easy to stay invisible. She preferred it that way. That morning, the 28th floor was nearly silent. Most executives were still in meetings or not in yet, leaving only the faint hum of the air system. Evelyn was halfway down the hall, mop in hand, when she caught it, a soft, muffled sound. Not the click of heels, not the ring of a phone. A small, uneven breath followed by a sniffle. She stopped listening. The sound came again from the far corner of the VIP lounge. Pushing her cart closer, she saw the back of a large armchair facing the window. And behind it, just barely visible, a small figure curled in on itself. Maren Lockwood, 6 years old. The CEO's daughter. Her knees were tucked to her chest, her chin buried, eyes red as if she'd been holding in tears for a while. Evelyn froze. She'd seen the girl in passing, always with a nanny, always quiet, but never like this. Something about the sight tugged at her in a way she wasn't ready for. She tightened her grip on the mop handle. This was exactly the sort of moment she'd promised herself to avoid. But her feet didn't move. Not yet. The VIP lounge on the 28th floor always felt like a world apart from the rest of the building. It was hushed, the kind of quiet where you could hear the soft hum of the air system if you listened closely. Thick carpet muted every step, and the tall panes of glass along the wall let in a muted light that made the room feel like early evening no matter the hour. The coffee table gleamed untouched, and the chairs were arranged in that deliberate way decorators liked, meant to be looked at more than used. Evelyn Hart pushed her cart inside, her shoes sinking into the plush carpet. She had been here 1,000 times, always moving around the edges, cleaning without leaving a trace. That was the unspoken rule: be efficient, be invisible, and for heaven's sake, don't linger. Especially around the CEO's daughter. Today, she saw the child before she even finished crossing the room. Maren Lockwood sat curled in the far corner, knees pulled up, head bent so her hair hid most of her face. There was no nanny in sight. Her small shoulders lifted and dropped in an uneven rhythm, the sound of her breathing breaking every so often with a quiet sniffle. Evelyn hesitated. She knew the story, everyone did. Maren hadn't spoken to anyone but her father in months. Nannies came and went, some lasting only a week. Therapists had tried. Specialists, too. None of them had gotten through. The order from above had been clear. No one was to approach the child. It wasn't a suggestion, it was policy. But seeing her there, folded in on herself, Evelyn felt something in her chest shift. She told herself to keep moving, to focus on the cart in front of her, but her hand stilled on the handle. After a moment, she reached into her tote bag, the worn canvas one that had more personal history than her apartment furniture, and pulled out an old teddy bear. Its fur was patchy from years of hugs, and one of its button eyes hung by a loose thread. Her grandson Noah had outgrown it, but she'd never been able to throw it away. She didn't say a word as she crouched down a few feet from Marin. She set the bear gently on the carpet, the way you might place something fragile. Then she gave it a soft push toward her and settled back on her heels, keeping her distance. Marin's head tilted, just enough to let one wary eye peek out. She stared at the bear for a long moment, her fingers twitching slightly. Eventually, she reached out, hesitant, like the toy might disappear if she moved too fast, and drew it into her arms. She held it close, her small hands brushing over the loose thread at its eye. "That's Theo," Evelyn said quietly, her voice warm but careful. "He likes to sit by the window when it rains. Says every drop that hits the glass is a hello from somewhere far away." Marin's gaze stayed on the bear, but her shoulders loosened a little. Evelyn continued, telling a short, gentle story about Theo counting raindrops until he fell asleep, dreaming of places where the rain never stopped. It was simple, the kind of story you could make up on the spot, but her words filled the space between them in a way the silence hadn't. When she finished, Evelyn rose slowly, feeling the stiffness in her knees. She adjusted the cart handle and started toward the door. She didn't expect anything, not a smile, not a word. She had done what she could without crossing too many lines. She was halfway to the hallway when it happened. "Thank you, ma'am." The voice was so soft Evelyn almost thought she'd imagined it. She paused, letting the words settle in the air, but didn't turn around. She simply stepped into the hall, her reflection catching in the elevator doors as they slid shut. For a moment, she saw not the cleaner in her worn sneakers, but someone standing in a space she hadn't been in for years, a place where you could still reach someone, even through the walls they built. She didn't know it yet, but that tiny crack in the silence was the start of something neither of them could have predicted. By the time Evelyn stepped off the bus in Queens, the sky was turning a soft shade of lavender, the kind that comes just before the streetlights hum to life. The workweek's rush had eased here. Storefronts were closing up, metal gates sliding down with a rattle, and the air carried the mixed smells of fried chicken from the corner deli and the faint sweetness of laundry detergent drifting from apartment windows. She crossed 2 blocks she could walk with her eyes closed, passing the same cracked sidewalks and faded murals she'd known for years, until she reached the elementary school gym. Inside, the echoes of bouncing basketballs and squeaking sneakers filled the air, along with the occasional shout from a coach. Noah spotted her almost immediately. At 10 years old, he was all angles, long legs, skinny arms, and an easy grin that made people like him on sight. His dark hair stuck up in a way that suggested he'd been moving nonstop since the final school bell. Slinging his duffel bag over one shoulder, he jogged to meet her. "You're late," he said with a mock frown, his voice still carrying a trace of breathlessness. "Get stuck in traffic or just daydreaming again?" Evelyn smiled and shook her head. Something like that. She didn't want to unpack what had kept her mind busy. The image of Marin on the 28th floor still pressed against the back of her thoughts. As they started the walk home, Noah began his usual round of questions about her day. He was naturally curious, always wanting details about the people in her building, the quirks of her job, the funny things she overheard in hallways. Evelyn answered in vague strokes until, without meaning to, she mentioned the little girl. "There's a girl I saw today," she said, her tone softer than usual. "About your age, maybe a year younger. What's she like?" Evelyn hesitated. "She looked sad," she said finally. "The kind of sad that feels like a rainy day." Noah tilted his head, as though turning her words into a picture in his mind. "What's her name?" She almost said it, then thought better of it. "Doesn't matter. She's from a different world than ours." And it was true. While they wove through the cracked sidewalks of their neighborhood, passing the bodega owner sweeping up for the night, and the hum of music from a second-floor apartment, another evening was unfolding across the city. In a glass tower high above Manhattan, Marin Lockwood sat at a long, gleaming dining table, her small plate of dinner untouched. The clink of silverware was absent. There was no one to share the meal with. Her father, Adrian, was behind a closed office door down the hall, pacing with a phone to his ear as the skyline blazed outside his window. The new nanny, the third one that month, sat on a stool in the kitchen scrolling through her phone, occasionally glancing toward Marin but saying nothing. Marin didn't speak either. She'd learned how to slip through evenings like this, unseen. Back in Queens, Evelyn unlocked the apartment door. Warm light spilled into the hallway, and the smell of the vegetable soup she'd left simmering greeted them. The walls inside were covered in family photos, birthdays, picnics, Little League games, snapshots of moments that seemed ordinary but had built the foundation of her life. Noah tossed his bag near the couch and flopped down with a sigh. So, is she in trouble or something? Evelyn set her purse on the counter. No, she just looked lonely. He frowned a little, thoughtful. Then his face brightened with a sudden idea. If she's that lonely, why don't you bring her here sometime? I could show her my comics, and we could make popcorn. Evelyn let out a low chuckle, stirring the soup. It's not that simple. Why not? He pressed. She didn't answer right away. The truth was tangled in rules she didn't make, unwritten lines between her world and Marin's, the kind that could cost her the only steady job she had if she crossed them. And yet, as she ladled soup into bowls, Noah's suggestion wouldn't leave her mind. The thought of Marin sitting here, curled into the couch with a bowl of popcorn and Noah chattering beside her, carried a kind of warmth she didn't want to acknowledge. They ate in comfortable quiet, the clink of spoons against bowls marking time. Outside, the streetlights glowed against the early evening mist. Evelyn kept telling herself it was a child's casual idea, nothing more. But somewhere, quietly, she knew the seed had been planted. And seeds had a way of growing when you least expected it. Monday mornings at Hartwell Dynamics carried a different kind of quiet, one that felt like the pause before a long climb. The air on the 28th floor smelled faintly of brewed coffee drifting from the executive pantry. Evelyn moved her cart down the hall, the rubber wheels rolling softly over the plush carpet, and stopped just short of the VIP lounge. She saw her before she even stepped inside. Marin was there again, tucked into the same corner chair, knees drawn up like a barrier. This time, Evelyn had come prepared. In the side pocket of her cart sat a children's picture book, its pages worn soft from years of turning. She pulled it out and began dusting the low table near Marin, her back angled just enough so the girl could see the book in her hands. You've got another story? Marin's voice was small but clearer than before. Evelyn looked over her shoulder, letting a faint smile touch her face. I do, but only if you're up for it. Marin shifted, her eyes flicking to the empty spot beside Evelyn. That was as much of an invitation as she was going to get. Evelyn settled into a chair a safe distance away and opened the book, her voice steady as she read. Marin listened this time, really listened, her gaze following the illustrations, her shoulders easing bit by bit. When the story ended, she glanced toward Evelyn with a trace of mischief in her eyes. Where's the bear? Evelyn tilted her head. Theo? He's at my place, waiting for a new friend to come visit. The words slipped out before she thought them through. Marin's eyes lit up, not with a smile exactly, but with something sharper, interest. You could come by sometime, Evelyn said casually, her tone careful, as if testing the weight of each word. Meet my grandson Noah and Theo, of course. Marin didn't answer, but the spark in her expression was impossible to miss. Evelyn began tidying up, feeling oddly light. She didn't see the man who had entered from the far side of the lounge, a tall figure with sharp features and a polished navy suit. Lionel Graves, chairman of the board, paused just long enough to watch Evelyn close the book. His eyes narrowed, and he made a note in the leather-bound pad he carried. A few minutes later, in the privacy of his office, Lionel's voice was smooth but pointed over the phone. Adrian, you might want to know your daughter's spending time with staff who aren't exactly qualified for that role. The implication hung in the air, deliberate and heavy. Evelyn knew nothing of that conversation. She spent the rest of her shift in the quiet routine of her tasks, though the memory of Marin's brightened gaze stayed with her. When the day ended, she wheeled her cart back to the service area, ready to clock out. She was wiping down her tote bag when she noticed movement in the doorway. Marin stood there, the hallway light spilling over her hair. "Your dad's here?" Evelyn asked, puzzled. Marin nodded, her face unreadable. "He told the driver to drop me off here," she said smoothly. "Said I should go with you." Something in the evenness of her tone made Evelyn pause. She was certain Adrian Lockwood had done no such thing. But before she could press, Marin took a small step forward, that spark of determination from earlier still in her eyes. Evelyn's hand tightened on the strap of her bag. She knew she was about to step over a line she couldn't unstep. And yet, she found herself saying, "Well, I suppose we better not keep Theo waiting." The sun was sliding lower by the time Evelyn turned the key in her apartment door. The narrow hallway opened into a living room that smelled faintly of cinnamon and chocolate, a scent that seemed to wrap itself around you before you even stepped inside. Marin paused in the doorway, her eyes catching on the details: the scuffed coffee table, the crocheted throw on the couch, the steady tick of a wall clock. It wasn't like the places she knew. The furniture didn't match, and the frames on the walls were all different shapes and colors, but each one held a frozen moment. Noah grinning, with missing teeth, Evelyn's daughter holding a birthday cake, a picnic where someone's hat had blown into the frame. Marin studied them the way she might study a painting, as if looking for the story behind each image. From the kitchen, the warm, sweet smell grew stronger. The oven light glowed on a tray of chocolate chip cookies, their edges turning golden. Evelyn, slipping off her jacket, noticed Marin's nose twitch as she took the scent. "They'll be ready in a few minutes," she said casually, not wanting to break the spell of the moment. Noah appeared, wiping his hands on his sweatpants, still flushed from the basketball game. For a second, he hung back, his curiosity obvious but guarded. Then he tipped his head toward the sliding glass door. "Want to see the balcony?" Marin hesitated, then gave a small nod. Noah slid the door open, letting in a breath of evening air. The balcony was small, just enough space for 2 chairs and a row of potted herbs, but from there you could see the red and brown rooftops stretching out across Queens. "That's the building where my friend Mason lives," Noah said, pointing with his chin. "And down there," he leaned on the railing, gesturing toward a patch of grass by the dumpsters. "That's where the cats hang out. Don't try to pet them. They're all attitude." Marin followed his finger and spotted 3 cats sprawled in the fading sunlight, one batting lazily at a crumpled paper bag. Something softened in her expression. She let out the smallest of smiles, quick and unguarded. Inside, Evelyn saw it from the kitchen doorway. She didn't mention it, but her chest tightened in a way she couldn't explain. Instead, she poured cocoa into a mug, topping it with a curl of whipped cream, and set it on the coffee table. Marin stepped in from the balcony, her cheeks faintly pink from the breeze. She glanced at Evelyn, murmured a quiet thanks, and wrapped her hands around the mug. Evelyn settled into her armchair, pretending to busy herself with the knitting needles in her lap. She listened to the muffled hum of Noah explaining something about his comic books, the rustle of pages as Marin leaned over to look. It was easy natural, too natural, and that was what worried her. The longer Marin stayed, the more Evelyn felt the risk pressing in. This was crossing lines she'd promised herself she wouldn't. The company's rules weren't just suggestions. Getting caught could mean losing her job. And if the wrong person decided she was overstepping, it wouldn't just be her neck on the line. Marin could be pulled into something that would hurt her more than help. By the time the sky outside had turned a deep blue, Evelyn knew it was time to take her home. She walked her down the narrow stairwell, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the stillness. Outside, a black town car idled at the curb, its polished surface reflecting the streetlight. The driver stepped out, his posture crisp, his tone polite but edged with something else. "Miss Marin," he said, holding the door for her. "Your father said you were at the library today." Marin didn't blink. "We stopped there after," she said smoothly. Evelyn felt her stomach knot. She knew the lie was effortless, and she suspected the driver could tell too. He gave her a look, not openly hostile, but sharp enough to make its point, before Marin slid into the back seat. The car pulled away, the taillights fading into the traffic. Evelyn stood on the sidewalk a moment longer, her hands tucked into her sleeves. The night air was cool, but it wasn't the chill that made her uneasy. It was the sense that something had shifted, that the tide had started to move in a direction she might not be able to turn back from. The 40th floor conference room at Hartwell Dynamics was built to impress. The table was a polished slab of dark walnut, the floor-to-ceiling windows swallowing half the wall and spilling the Manhattan skyline into the room like a painting too large for its frame. Adrian Lockwood sat at the head, sleeves rolled up, a coffee cooling by his elbow. His eyes were fixed on a tablet, scrolling through numbers, when the door shut behind Lionel Graves. Lionel didn't sit right away. He liked to let his presence settle first. Adrian, he began in that low, deliberate tone he used when he was about to deliver bad news dressed as a warning. We have a problem. Adrian didn't look up. If this is about the European accounts. It's not about accounts, Lionel cut in. He took the seat opposite, steepling his fingers. It's about your daughter, and a member of the cleaning staff. Now Adrian's gaze lifted, sharp and cold. Evelyn. Lionel nodded once. Yes. Evelyn Hart. I've personally witnessed, her spending significant time with Marin. Today, I learned she's been seen taking the girl out of the building. Adrian's jaw tightened. That's not what happened. I'm sure you believe that, Lionel said smoothly. But the facts don't care about intent. We have policies for a reason. Imagine the headlines. CEO's daughter left in care of unvetted janitor. That alone is enough to spark legal trouble. Investors hate loose ends, Adrian. Evelyn's not some stranger off the street, Adrian countered. She's been here for years. She's trustworthy. Lionel leaned forward, voice lowering as if the glass walls could carry secrets. This isn't about trust. It's about liability. We should have a professional in place, licensed, vetted, the kind of person whose resume we can wave in front of the press if we have to. Adrian didn't answer right away. He rubbed his temple, eyes fixed on the skyline. I'll think about it. I'd think quickly, Lionel replied, rising. Before this turns into something you can't control. On the 28th floor, Evelyn had no idea what was being said upstairs. She was mopping the corner hallway when a plain white envelope appeared on her cleaning cart. Her name wasn't on it, just her employee ID printed neatly in black ink. Inside was a single page on company letterhead. Formal notice of policy violation. The words blurred a little as she read, but she caught the phrases exceeding assigned duties and unsanctioned contact with executive family members. Her hands felt suddenly clumsy. She stood there for a moment, the smell of floor cleaner in her nose, the letters weight pressing against her chest. When she slid it back into the envelope, Marta from the night shift appeared, walking past with her head down. Without stopping, Marta murmured, Graves is watching you. Be careful. The rest of her shift was muscle memory. Spray, wipe, rinse. She kept seeing Marin's face in the splotches of water on the glass doors. Kept hearing the quiet, thank you. The girl had whispered that first day. It would be safer to step back now, to go back to polite nods and nothing more. She could pretend she hadn't noticed the loneliness in Marin's eyes. By the time her shift ended, she'd almost convinced herself. In the supply closet, she reached for her bag and froze. On the top shelf of her locker sat a folded piece of paper, the corners bent, the colors bright against the dull metal. She pulled it down slowly. It was a drawing done in thick, uneven crayon lines. 3 figures stood side by side, one tall, one medium, one small. Above them, little yellow halos shimmered in a child's imagination. Beneath the figures in crooked letters that leaned like they were learning to stand were the words, Family Stays. Her throat tightened. She sat down on the bench, the paper trembling just slightly in her hands. She didn't need to guess who had drawn it. The warning letter was still in her bag, its cold language wrapped in corporate formality. But this was warm, messy, human. She folded the drawing with care and slid it into her coat pocket, the one she kept closest to her heart. If keeping her distance meant leaving Marin to sink back into that silence, she already knew her answer. The cost didn't matter. The job didn't matter. Bryant Park had that early autumn calm that makes you slow down without meaning to. The leaves along the promenade were just starting to turn, a lace of yellow at the tips. Office workers drifted across the lawn with paper cups and late lunches. Evelyn cut through the park on her way to the subway, hands tucked into the sleeves of her cardigan, when a voice called out behind her. "Ma'am." "Evelyn." She turned, and there was Marin, a few steps away, a new nanny trailing behind and trying not to look impatient. The woman wore neat sneakers and a fixed smile that didn't reach her eyes. Marin, on the other hand, looked alert, almost relieved. "I wasn't sure it was you," Marin said, coming closer. "I wanted to show you something. I drew a picture. For my dad." She glanced back at the nanny, then lowered her voice. He looked at it and said it was nice. Then he put it in a drawer. Evelyn softened. "What was in the picture, honey?" "3 people," Marin said. She stared down at her shoes. "We were holding hands." Evelyn didn't ask who those 3 were. She didn't need to. "Maybe he'll take it out later," she offered gently. Some grown-ups don't know what to do with good things when they're busy. Marin's mouth quirked like she wanted to believe it. The nanny hovered a few feet away, checking her phone and pretending not to listen. They walked toward the edge of the lawn together, talking in that small, ordinary way that can carry more weight than big speeches. Marin told her the new nanny liked puzzles. Evelyn said Noah was learning to make grilled cheese without burning the bread. For a minute, the city felt less sharp. Then the sky changed. A breeze moved through the trees and the light dimmed, the way it does right before a storm decides to show itself. The first drop hit Evelyn's hand, cool and certain. "Oh, that's coming fast," Evelyn said. She took Marin's hand in a simple, practical gesture and steered her toward the nearest awning, a little cafe with metal chairs stacked along the wall. The nanny hurried after them, holding a newspaper over her head, but when the rain really opened up, she ducked inside the cafe to argue with the barista about to-go cups. Under the awning, the city blurred. Rain stitched the park into moving silver, and a smell of wet earth rose up from the grass. Marin stood close to Evelyn, watching the drops break on the pavement. "It sounds like your stories," Marin said. "The ones with the bear who listens." "Theo likes this kind of weather," Evelyn said, smiling. "Says it's how the sky talks." Marin took a breath, then slid her hand into the pocket of her jacket. "I brought you something," she whispered, like a secret too big to carry any longer. She opened her palm. A small key lay there, no bigger than a house key, on a keychain shaped like a teddy bear's face. The paint on the nose was rubbed thin. Evelyn stared at it. "What's this for, sweetheart?" "So you can come in if I call," Marin said, eyes steady. "Dad's office is loud. Sometimes nobody hears me. But you would." She swallowed. "Only if I call. I'm not supposed to have it." "I know. But I want you to keep it." Evelyn's first thought was the right one. This was a terrible idea. Every rule she knew shouted no. The second thought came quieter, but sat deeper. The child had chosen trust, and that was not something you trained out of a soul without leaving a mark. "That's a lot to ask," Evelyn said carefully. "Keys mean responsibility." "I know," Marin said. "I won't use it to get you in trouble. I promise." Evelyn took the key, because she could see what it cost the girl to offer it. She slipped it into her cardigan pocket and patted the spot, as if to say it would be safe there. "All right," she said softly. "Only if you call. And only if it keeps you safe." Across the walkway, a man had paused beneath an umbrella, the kind of expensive black umbrella that looks like it came with a chauffeur. He was just another figure in the rain until he wasn't. Lionel Graves stood at an angle, pretending to adjust his phone, then lifted it slightly. A flashless click. Another. He turned away before either of them noticed, his expression already composed for a meeting that would happen later. The nanny reappeared, thrusting a lidded cup into Marin's hands. "Hot chocolate," she announced, breathless and annoyed. "We should go. Your father expects you at 6. Marin nodded and looked at Evelyn, a question in her eyes. Evelyn squeezed her shoulder once, a small anchor in the storm. "Go on then. You'll catch cold if you stand here much longer." They parted at the curb where the rain had thinned to a steady patter. Marin climbed into a waiting car with the nanny, and the driver pulled away, tires whispering on wet pavement. Evelyn stood a moment longer under the cafe awning, listening to the city return to itself. On the subway home, she kept her hand in her pocket like a reflex, feeling the shape of the key through the knit. With every station, the choice settled a little heavier. By the time she reached Queens, the clouds had broken apart and the sidewalks steamed in the last light of day. Inside her apartment, she set her bag on a chair and took the key out. The teddy face hung from it, scratched but cheerful. She placed it on the small dish by the door where she kept her spare change and the grocery list. Then she moved it, almost immediately, to the inner pocket of her coat. Evelyn stood there in the quiet, hearing the refrigerator hum and the distant clatter of someone's dishes next door. She understood that nothing would be simple after this. The key would make it easier to help if help was needed. It would also invite the kind of attention she had spent years avoiding. She slipped the key back into her pocket and closed her hand around it. Whatever storm it brought, it wasn't the kind you dodged by staying indoors. It was the kind you faced by showing up. Friday night had wrapped the city in its usual restless hum. From the penthouse balcony of the Lockwood residence, the streets below looked like an endless river of lights, moving and colliding without ever touching. Evelyn was in her kitchen in Queens, rinsing out a mug, when the phone rang, not her own, but the number flashing on the caller ID made her pause. She recognized it. The landline from the Lockwood penthouse. She hesitated before answering. "Hello." "It's me," Marin's voice came, low and urgent. "Can you come over? Please." Evelyn leaned against the counter, the sponge still in her hand. "Marin, it's late. Where's your father?" "He's in the dining room. There are guests. Important people." Marin's tone carried that quiet understanding of adult priorities that no child should have. "The nanny's in her room with the door locked. She's been on the phone for hours." Evelyn closed her eyes. She could hear the unspoken, the long stretch of evening where no one would check if Marin was laughing or crying. "You know I'm not supposed to." "Please," Marin whispered again. "I just don't want to be alone tonight." That was the pivot. Evelyn could feel it. The rule book from Hartwell Dynamics was clear. No unscheduled visits, no personal contact beyond assigned duties. She'd already pushed the line more than once. But the image of Marin, wandering that vast penthouse like a ghost in her own home, tipped the scale. "I'll have to bring Noah," Evelyn said finally. "We'll come by for a minute. Say we're dropping something off you left at the office." Marin exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. "Okay, I'll wait." By the time Evelyn and Noah reached the Lockwood building, the lobby was quiet except for the polished-voiced concierge who waved them through without question. The private elevator opened into the expanse of the penthouse, where warm lighting spilled over white marble floors. Marin was waiting just past the door, her hair loose, socks mismatched. Her face lit up when she saw them. "You made it," she said, pulling Noah inside. "What's this about?" Noah grinned, glancing around at the kind of space he'd only seen in movies. Marin held up a box. "Puzzle night. 3,000 pieces. We'll never finish it, but we can try." Evelyn smiled despite herself. "All right, but just in the living room." They spread the pieces across the low glass table, leaning in over the chaos of colors. Marin explained the picture, a sprawling lighthouse scene at sunset, while Noah tried to edge sort like a professional. For a while, the room was filled with nothing but the rustle of cardboard and the occasional laugh when someone found a piece that fit. Evelyn sat back now and then, watching Marin's face change, the guarded lines easing into something freer. The moment broke with the sound of footsteps, firm and measured. Evelyn turned to see Lionel Graves coming in from the hallway, flanked by 2 men and a woman in tailored suits. The air shifted. "Well," Lionel said, smiling as if they'd stumbled on a charming tableau. "I didn't realize Hartwell staff offered in-home recreational services." Evelyn rose, keeping her posture even. "Just dropping off something Marin left." "Of course." Lionel's eyes held hers a beat too long, his expression polite but laced with intent. "Enjoy your evening." The group moved toward the dining room, voices low but threaded with that polished edge of deal-making. Evelyn felt the weight of Lionel's glance linger even as he disappeared from view. She returned to the table, but the warmth of the moment had cooled. An hour later, The guests were gone. The echo of their departure still hung in the penthouse when Adrian Lockwood appeared in the doorway. His suit jacket was off, shirt sleeves rolled neatly to the elbow. He didn't speak at first, just looked at Evelyn, then at the half-assembled puzzle. "Marin, sweetheart, could you take Noah to the kitchen? Ask Maria for some cookies." His voice was calm, but there was a current underneath. When the children had gone, Adrian stepped closer. "Stay a moment," he said. "It wasn't a request. We need to talk." Evelyn searched his face for a clue: anger, suspicion, maybe gratitude. But it was unreadable. She only knew that whatever came next, the night had crossed another invisible line. The dining room felt strangely hollow now that the investors had left. The polished table still gleamed, wine glasses half full, but the air had cooled. Adrian stood at the head of the table, one hand gripping the back of a chair as if steadying himself. His voice, when it came, was low but edged. "Sit down, Evelyn. I want to know why you're here." She eased into a chair across from him. Her fingers itched to fold neatly in her lap, but she forced them to stay loose. "Marin called me. She said she didn't want to be alone tonight. I thought bringing Noah might." "So you ignored every boundary in your job description?" Adrian's words were clipped, like they'd been sharpened beforehand. "You understand how this looks to anyone watching?" Evelyn held his gaze. "I understand how it feels to her, and that matters more to me than how it looks." Before he could respond, Marin's voice floated in from the doorway, small but steady. "You've never been home at night to play with me." She stepped closer, her eyes fixed on him. "Evelyn and Noah don't treat me like I'm broken." The words landed like a stone in water, quiet, but the ripple spread. Adrian's lips parted, but nothing came out. His hand dropped from the chair. Evelyn watched a flicker of something, guilt, maybe, pass across his face before he smoothed it over. From somewhere down the hall, Lionel Graves' voice carried, sharp and low, speaking into a phone. Moments later, Adrian's own phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. The subject line glared up at him. "Regarding Ms. Hart, urgent." He opened it. Evelyn couldn't see the whole thing, but she caught the attached photo. Her and Marin under the Bryant Park awning. Rain streaking the glass behind them. Lionel's message was brief, clinical. Potential reputational risks. Inappropriate familiarity with executive family members. Recommend immediate review. Adrian's jaw tightened. "This isn't just about tonight anymore," he said quietly. Evelyn could have explained. She could have told him that the rain that day had been nothing but rain, that she'd simply been holding space for a lonely child. But his tone told her he wasn't asking for her story. He was weighing his options. Marin stepped right up beside him now, chin lifted. "If you make her leave, it means you weren't listening." Her voice trembled at the edges, but the words were solid. Adrian turned to his daughter. For a second, his expression softened, like he wanted to kneel, to say he was sorry, to ask what she needed. Then his face shifted back to the careful, unreadable calm Evelyn had seen in boardrooms. In the corner of her mind, she could picture Lionel already moving his next piece. He would have forwarded that photo to the board. He'd frame it as safeguarding the company. But Evelyn knew he was drawing lines meant to isolate her. Her phone buzzed. It was a forwarded message from an assistant she barely knew. "Board meeting. Tomorrow morning." The body contained just one line, regarding the employment status of Evelyn Hart. She slid the phone back into her pocket. The fight was no longer just hers to choose. It had become Adrian's, whether he liked it or not. Adrian looked between them. The daughter who had just spoken more truth in one breath than she had in months, and the woman whose presence seemed to stir something neither of them wanted to name. Somewhere outside the glass walls, the city pulsed on, cars sliding through wet streets, 1,000 stories unfolding beyond their view. Inside, the three of them stood on a threshold neither could step back from. And Evelyn knew, as sure as the rain had fallen that afternoon, that by tomorrow morning, the door would either close on her for good or open in a way none of them could predict. Morning light hit the 40th floor glass like a clean blade. Inside the boardroom, the table looked long enough to land a plane, polished to a gloss that reflected the ceiling lights. Adrian took the seat at the head, jacket buttoned. expression set to neutral. Around him, the board filtered in with coffee cups and tablet covers. Voices low, the room settling into that clipped cadence of corporate ritual. Lionel Graves opened a folder with a little showman's flourish, then glanced toward legal. "Thank you for making yourselves available on short notice," he began. "We have a matter that touches both governance and risk. Specifically, the conduct of an hourly employee, Evelyn Hart, and her unsanctioned interaction with the CEO's minor child." The general counsel, a careful woman named Patel, folded her hands. "We're here to hear facts and discuss exposure." Lionel slid a printed photograph onto the center of the table. The paper made a soft slap as it landed. "Exhibit 1, he said, voice smooth. "Ms. Hart with a child in a public setting. No child care credentials. No clearance. This is not rumor. It is documented." A murmured ripple moved along the table. Someone cleared his throat. Someone else scribbled a note. "Before we treat a picture like a verdict," Adrian said, keeping his tone even, "let's state what's also true. My daughter has made measurable progress in the weeks she's known Ms. Hart. She sleeps through the night. She's speaking again. We are not a therapy center." A director named Rosen cut in. He was always blunt, always loud. "We are a publicly traded company. Optics matter. Liability matters." Lionel nodded, as if the point had been his. "No one is questioning the child's needs. We are questioning process. There are protocols for a reason. Staff do not take executive family members off-site. Staff do not enter the penthouse. Staff do not." Adrian lifted a hand. "Enough with staff like they're interchangeable. Ms. Hart is a human being who showed up where a dozen experts failed. The board should want to understand that." Patel leaned forward a fraction. "Our duty is to protect the enterprise. If the press frames this as negligent supervision, if an incident occurs, if a plaintiff's firm decides to make an example of Hartwell." "No incident occurred," Adrian said. His voice stayed steady, but a line had formed at the corner of his mouth. "What did occur is that my daughter found a person she trusts." Lionel tapped the photograph without looking at it. "Trust is not a policy. The street will not reward sentiment. We need a corrective action today. Remove Ms. Hart from any contact, formalize a care plan with licensed providers, and communicate boundaries to all employees. Clean, simple, responsible." For a moment, the room took on the low hum of agreement. That was how these things moved, momentum toward the path of least resistance. Adrian's tablet vibrated. He glanced down just once. The message preview was a single line from an address he didn't recognize. "Check this before the vote." A link followed. He tapped. The video filled the screen. Handheld, a little shaky, shot in soft light. Marin's room. A child-sized desk with colored pencils. Marin sitting on the edge of her bed, talking to the nanny in a voice that sounded older than it should have. "If they fire Ms. Evelyn," Marin said, hands twisted in her lap, "I'm not talking to anyone anymore. Not at school. Not here. Not to Dad. I'm done." The nanny's voice was barely audible. "Sweetheart, you don't have to." "I'm done," Marin repeated, soft but sure. The clip ended. On the bottom corner, a timestamp from last night. In the subject line of the original email, 2 words, "For him." Adrian didn't ask who had sent it. He knew enough about buildings and the people who keep them running to guess that someone with a quiet conscience had decided the board deserved context. He turned the tablet so the others could see. No audio over the speaker, just closed captions he toggled on. The room watched. Even Rosen stopped scribbling. Patel's pen stilled. When the screen went dark, the silence stretched. The photograph in the center of a table looked suddenly less like proof and more like a fragment. A director at the far end cleared her throat. If this is the child's state of mind, removing the one adult she trusts could create greater risk, not less. Another voice softer. "There is a values question here. We talk about community in every town hall. Do we mean it?" Lionel's smile thinned. "This is a private corporation, not a parish. We can meet the child's needs through appropriate channels. We do not outsource welfare to unqualified personnel because it makes a nice story. Adrian closed the tablet. He let the quiet settle a beat longer, then looked from face to face. "You all know the numbers," he said. "You know how to price a product and hedge a currency swing. I'm not asking you to forget that. I am asking you to remember we build this place with people, not statutes." Patel exhaled. "What action are you proposing, Adrian?" He didn't hesitate. "We stop treating Evelyn like a risk and start treating her like a resource. We formalize her role within strict guardrails. We pair her with licensed clinicians. We create a small, properly supervised pilot focused on emotional literacy for children. We do it by the book, but we do it." Rosen started to protest. Adrian cut him off, not with volume, but with clarity. "There are things," he said, eyes on Lionel now, "that if we throw away today, we will never get back." The boardroom still felt heavy with the echo of Marin's voice from the video. Some of the directors avoided Adrian's eyes. Others waited to see how the tide would turn. Lionel leaned back, his hands clasped, wearing the calm of someone who thought he still had control. "A child," Lionel said smoothly, "cannot dictate corporate policy. We have governance for a reason. Emotional appeals, however touching, do not run companies." Adrian didn't answer right away. He rose from his chair with a deliberate slowness, resting both hands on the polished table. His voice, when it came, was even but carried through the room. "I'm not suggesting my daughter write the handbook, Lionel. I'm saying that sometimes our rules stop us from doing the very thing we claim we stand for: trust, connection, responsibility." Lionel's smile didn't falter, but a muscle in his jaw worked once. "And yet those rules protect us from liabilities that could cost millions." Adrian let out a quiet breath. "I've made my decision. Evelyn Hart stays. Not only that, she will have a formal role in a new division we're creating, one focused on emotional development for children. We're calling it the Eliora Initiative." The room stirred. A few heads turned sharply. "You're serious?" asked Rosen, his voice thick with disbelief. "You want to put a janitor at the center of a corporate program?" "Titles don't build trust," Adrian replied. "People do." A director from the far side leaned forward, brows furrowed. "You know the market will see this as an emotional stunt. If investors think you're distracted by pet projects." "Then we explain," Adrian cut in, calm but firm. "We tell them the truth. This initiative aligns with our values, our brand, and our future market in educational technology. We don't just talk about changing lives. We show it." "That's a gamble," Patel said softly, almost to herself. Adrian met her eyes. "So is asking customers to trust a product we make for their families when my own child can't trust me." The sentence landed in the room like a weight. No one rushed to fill the silence. Even Lionel shifted in his seat, adjusting his cufflinks without looking up. Evelyn sat near the wall, a quiet observer through most of the exchange, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Every word Adrian spoke sounded resolute, but a part of her wondered if it was conviction or performance. She had seen powerful men speak with fire in their voices, only to retreat behind closed doors. Was she a symbol to him now, useful until the storm passed, or someone he genuinely believed could do the job? The thought twisted in her chest. She kept her face still, knowing eyes might be on her. Lionel finally broke the pause. "If you force this through, Adrian, you're putting your name and ours on the line. The board will expect quarterly updates. And if the numbers dip..." "Then I take the heat," Adrian said simply. No one spoke after that. Patel cleared her throat and suggested a recess. The board agreed, pushing their chairs back. Papers were gathered, tablets closed. The hum of side conversations rose as people filed toward the door, eager for fresh air and coffee. Evelyn stayed seated until the room thinned. When she finally stood, Adrian was watching her. "Stay a moment," he said. Her instinct was to guard herself. "If this is about optics, Mr. Lockwood..." "It's about more than optics," he interrupted. "I'll explain tonight. I want you to meet me at the penthouse at 7. Just you and me. We'll talk about what the Eliora Initiative actually is, and what role I want you to play." She hesitated. "And if I say no?" "Then you say no," he said almost gently. but I think you'll want to hear me out." The recess call echoed from the hallway. Evelyn gave a small nod, not promising, not refusing. Adrian picked up his notes, his face unreadable again. As she left the boardroom, the words Eliora Initiative repeated in her mind, half invitation, half warning. The service elevator rose without music, a quiet box of brushed steel that gave Evelyn time to hear her own breathing. When the doors opened, the city rushed at her all at once. Wind off the river, sirens far below, a low electric thrum that never really stopped. The roof of Hartwell Dynamics stretched out in clean lines and shadow, with a waist-high rail and a scattering of maintenance lights. New York glowed underfoot. Adrian was waiting near the edge, jacket folded over his arm, tie loosened. He looked like he had been standing in the wind for a while, letting it clear his head. "Thanks for coming," he said. "I figured you didn't invite me up here to talk about floor polish," Evelyn answered, offering a small smile. He nodded toward the skyline. "We built this place to be efficient, to scale. You can feel that in the hallways downstairs, everything moves, nothing lingers. It's good for revenue. It's not so good for people." He paused. "I didn't ask you to stay because Marin likes you. That matters, but it isn't the reason. I'm asking you to help because I want to change the air in this building. A little less frost. A little more room to breathe." Evelyn rested her hands on the rail. The city lights painted her knuckles gold. "You don't need me to tell you that's a tall order," she said. "Folks here are trained to keep their eyes forward. You start asking them to look at each other. Some will get nervous." "I know." His voice softened. "But I'm tired of watching us talk about values on slides, then measure success by how fast we can forget them." She let that sit. Wind pulled a strand of hair loose at her temple. "When my daughter started night shifts at the hospital, Noah came to me most evenings," she said. "I learned quick that kids don't always need answers. They need presence. Someone to notice the small things, how they stir their cereal when they're worried, where they sit when they want to disappear. If you notice enough, they start to believe they exist in a safe way." She glanced at him. "I don't fix children. I witness them. Most of the time, that's enough for them to start fixing themselves." Adrian watched her with a level gaze. "That's exactly what I'm trying to build," he said. "Not a therapy center. A habit. A company that remembers to notice." "You'll catch heat for it," she said, not unkindly. "They'll call it soft. They'll say it distracts from the work." "Then they've misunderstood the work," he replied. "We build tools for families and schools. If we can't carry a little warmth into that, what are we doing?" Evelyn studied him, the lines at the corners of his eyes, the way he kept his shoulders squared even when he sounded tired. She believed he meant it. She still worried about what would happen when the market barked. "Tell me what you want from me," she said. "I want you to shape the first pilot," he answered. "Small, contained, measurable. A handful of kids. A few trained clinicians. You at the center to set tone. We'll do it right. We'll do it by the book. But the book will have your handwriting on the margins." She laughed once, quiet. "That's a lot of faith to place in a woman with a mop." "It's not faith," he said. "It's evidence. I saw my daughter laugh tonight." He let the sentence hang there, as if the plainness of it was the proof. Footsteps scraped near the access door. The sound was wrong for maintenance. Lionel stepped onto the roof, coat closed against the wind, phone in his hand. He didn't look surprised to find them. "I wonder where you'd gone," he said. "I thought I'd save you the trouble of a late-night email." He lifted his phone slightly, like a short baton cueing an orchestra. 3 of our top funds called after the meeting. They're aligned. If you proceed with this initiative as stated, with Ms. Hart in any formal capacity, they'll reduce their holdings by morning after tomorrow." Adrian's jaw worked once. "Names." "You know them," Lionel replied, calm as a weatherman. "Rothman Ridge. Tide Light. The Kessler Group. They're not angry. They're practical. They see drift. They trim sail. They gave me a number. It isn't catastrophic, but it will rattle the street. And you." He slipped the phone into his pocket and looked from one to the other. "You have 24 hours to withdraw your proposal. Announce a review. Hire a consultant with the right pedigree. Put our friend here back where she belongs." His eyes flicked toward Evelyn, polite and dismissive at once. "Or don't. But understand the price." "No one asked you to speak for me," Adrian said. Lionel smiled in a way that didn't touch his eyes. "I don't speak for you. I speak for gravity. Good night." He left as neatly as he had arrived, the door easing shut behind him. Wind pushed a cool hand across the roof. For a moment, the city seemed louder. Horns, a helicopter somewhere over the river, the pulse of lights along 6th. Evelyn kept her gaze on the rail, then turned back to Adrian. "You don't owe me anything," she said, steady. "If you decide this is too much, say so. I'll go back to my cart and my corners. I won't like it, but I'll live." He shook his head, once. "That's not what I'm deciding." "What are you deciding then?" He didn't answer with words. He looked at her, and in the set of his mouth and the lift of his chin, she could read it. The choice to step into headwind rather than angle away. It would change his company. It would change his home. It would change the ground beneath all three of them. Evelyn nodded, as if they had spoken out loud. She reached for the door. "7 tomorrow," she said. "7," he answered. They went back into the elevator, the hum of the machinery filling the small space. Below them, the city kept moving, unaware that a line had been drawn on a roof where most people would never stand. The conference room was quieter than it should have been for a morning like this. No one tapped on a laptop or shuffled papers. Even the HVAC hum seemed to hold its breath. Lionel stood at the head of the table, a tablet in his hand, posture straight, as if the weight of his proposal demanded perfect alignment. "This," he began, flicking a slide onto the wall, "is our most efficient course correction. We dissolve the Eliora initiative. In its place, we hire a high-profile PR director who will oversee a humanitarian brand campaign, school donations, publicized grants, all the right optics, without the complications." He didn't need to say Evelyn's name. The space left for it was large enough to fill the room. Adrian's chair creaked as he leaned forward. "So instead of actual substance, we sell the image of it." Lionel gave him the practiced smile of someone who had survived decades in boardrooms. "We package our values in a way the market can understand." Adrian's voice sharpened. "You mean in a way the market can pretend to understand? That's not leadership, Lionel. That's costume work. You can't counterfeit kindness and expect it to hold." There was a ripple across the table. Some members glanced at one another, others at the door. Lionel, unruffled, glanced at the clock. "Perhaps it's time we hear from Miss Hart herself. If she has a compelling reason, let's put it on record." The door opened and Evelyn stepped in. She wasn't in uniform. She'd come in a plain navy dress, hair pinned back, her hands empty. She didn't wait for an invitation to sit. "You want to know why this project matters?" she began, voice steady. "I could tell you about child development theories or site reports from the CDC. But that's not what will stick with you." She let her gaze move around the table, landing briefly on each face. "If you're worried about image, I want you to picture this instead. The eyes of a child who believes they are invisible. The way they stop speaking because they've decided no one is listening. That's your image problem. And you don't fix that with a billboard or a hashtag." The room stayed still. Her words didn't rush. They settled. Lionel cleared his throat. "Ms. Hart, this company has obligations beyond individual cases. We can't restructure our focus around one." "You think this is about one kid?" Evelyn cut in, not with anger, but with an edge of disbelief. "Marin's not unique. There are children in every district of this city, in every income bracket, who've been told with silence that they don't matter. We're not talking about charity. We're talking about the kind of foundation you build on, so everything else doesn't crumble." One of the junior board members pushed back his chair, murmuring that he had another engagement, and slipped out. Another followed. The tension in the air was thick enough to feel in the lungs. Adrian watched her, hands folded in front of his mouth. He didn't step in, didn't try to soften her words. She was saying what he couldn't without it sounding like spin. Finally, Evelyn looked at him. "I know my presence here complicates things for you. I know people think you're indulging your daughter. But if you let this die, you're not just keeping me out. You're telling every kid who walks through your products, your programs, your halls, that they're still not being seen. For a moment, the only sound was the faint whir of the projector cooling down. Lionel broke it. "You've made your point," he said, collecting his tablet. "Now here's mine. The vote will be in 24 hours. That's the final window. Either the board decides to continue with the project and keep Miss Hart in her role, or we close it before it opens. No extensions. No half measures." He didn't look at Evelyn again as he left, the door shutting firmly behind him. Evelyn stayed standing, unsure if she should leave. Adrian's eyes stayed on the table for a long beat, and when he finally looked up, she could see the weight there, not just of the decision, but of the fight it would take to defend it. She wondered, not for the first time, if she was making it harder for him. Harder for Marin. Harder for herself. But the thought didn't erase the truth in her chest. Some fights were worth making harder. Adrian leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Tomorrow, then." Evelyn gave a small nod and left the room, her footsteps quiet against the carpet, the clock already ticking down. Queens was quieter than usual that night. The radiator ticked, the upstairs neighbor's TV murmured through the ceiling, and the kettle on Evelyn's stove breathed out a soft hiss before settling into a low steam. Noah sat at the kitchen table with a deck of bent playing cards, flipping them one by one into a messy pile. He watched his grandmother move about the room, not in a hurry, but not at ease either. "Is tomorrow when they decide?" he asked, breaking the hush. "It is," Evelyn said, pouring hot water over 2 tea bags. "The board will vote." "About you," he said. Not a question. She set a mug in front of him. "About a lot of things. But yes, about me." Noah turned a card over, then another. "If they say you can't work there anymore, will you be okay?" Evelyn stared at the steam curling off her tea. "I've lost jobs before. You put one foot in front of the other. That's what grown-ups do." He didn't smile. "That's not what I asked." She pulled out a chair. The kitchen clock clicked its steady little beat above them. "I'll be fine," she said, and heard how thin it sounded. Noah leaned his elbows on the table. "If you don't do it, if you walk away, who's going to stay with Marin?" The question reached a place in her she kept guarded. Her hand went to her mouth as if to hold in the ache. She swallowed hard and nodded once, a small surrender to truth. "That's the thing I can't set down," she admitted. They sat with that for a long minute. Finally, Noah gathered the cards, squared the edges, and pushed the neat stack toward her like a promise. "Do what you think is right," he said. "I'll be okay. She needs you more." Evelyn pressed his hand, then stood to wash the mugs. The night outside their window was an ordinary night, but it felt like the eve of a crossing. Morning at Hartwell brought polished floors and careful voices. The private boardroom smelled faintly of coffee and new paper. Directors took their places. Legal counsel arranged folders. The screen at the far end of the table glowed with the agenda. Lionel sat straight-backed, composed. Adrian arrived last, a small crease at his brow, and gave a curt nod to begin. Patel from Legal summarized procedures. Then Lionel outlined his motion. Suspend the ELIRA initiative. Remove Evelyn from any contact with the CEO's family. Initiate a search for credentialed providers and prepare a communication plan. Words like prudent and responsible slid across the table with no rough edges. "Before we vote," Adrian said, standing, "I want Ms. Hart to speak." Evelyn rose from her chair along the wall. She felt every eye and chose not to be smaller for it. "You all know the risks," she began. "You've studied them, priced them, and put them in neat columns. I don't argue with columns. I came to say one thing I've learned the slow way. Children don't heal because we display a logo in the right place or because we say the right words on a brochure. They start to mend when someone stays long enough to notice, long enough to be counted on. If my stepping aside protects Mr. Lockwood or Marin from more trouble, I'll do it today. I'll sign whatever paper you put in front of me. But if you keep me, I'll work under every guardrail you set, and I'll show up day after day, until those kids believe they matter." She sat. The room was quiet in a way that wasn't empty. Lionel folded his hands. "Generous," he said, "but emotion cannot be our North Star." Adrian looked down the table, then back to Evelyn, then to the board again. When he spoke, his voice carried without strain. Ms. Hart's willingness to walk away is exactly why she should stay. I am not trading my daughter's trust or our company's character for a quiet news cycle. If investors step back, they step back. We will build with those who understand what we're building. The Eliora initiative proceeds. Ms. Hart will have a formal role with clinical oversight and clear boundaries. If there's a cost, it's mine to carry. A director on the left started to object about market impact. Adrian lifted a hand. We have asked families to believe we care. Today we either mean it or we don't. The vote that followed wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. The motion to dissolve failed. The pilot moved ahead. Evelyn's employment, newly defined, was approved. Chairs scraped back. Side conversations sparked, some relieved, some tight with disapproval. Lionel did not argue. He closed his tablet, stood, and left the room without comment, his expression giving nothing away. The door settled into its latch with a soft click that felt final. Evelyn let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Patel approached with a measured nod. We'll draft terms, she said. There will be forms. I can sign forms, Evelyn replied, a small smile finding its way to her face. In the hallway, outside, the morning bustle carried on. Assistants moved with clipboards. Someone laughed too loudly at a joke. The elevator pinged. Marin appeared at the far end as if she'd been waiting for a signal only she could hear. She broke into a run. Evelyn bent as the child wrapped her arms around her. They stood like that in the middle of the corridor, a knot of warmth in a place built for speed. People slowed. A few smiled. No one told them to move along. Something shifted in Evelyn then, nothing flashy, just the quiet settling of a truth. For years, she had perfected the art of not being seen. Now in the open, with a child's cheek pressed to her shoulder and the day's decision echoing behind her, she felt solid in her own outline. 1 month had passed since the vote that shifted the air inside Hartwell Dynamics. The building still gleamed. The conference rooms still echoed with polished arguments, but something in the culture had softened, like a winter that had given way to an early spring. Lionel Graves was gone. Officially, the press release called it a difference in vision. Internally, whispers said his departure wasn't entirely voluntary. A few loyal investors followed him out, taking their capital with them. But the gap didn't stay empty for long. New partners stepped forward, funds with an eye for projects that combined profit with social good. In some corners of the boardroom, that was seen as a gamble. In others, a rare second wind. For Evelyn, the month had been a blur of planning, hiring, and late nights shaping the Eliora initiative into something real. She had an office now, though she still found herself spending most of her time in the converted floor downtown, where the new children's center was taking shape. Desks gave way to play areas. Glass walls were replaced with murals painted by local artists. Instead of the usual corporate gray, the place breathed color. Marin came to the center often, sometimes with her father, sometimes with Noah in tow. The three of them had an ease now that hadn't existed before, though Adrian still carried the faint wariness of a man who knew how easily good things could be taken away. Evelyn respected that. She had learned not to push, only to show up, the same way she had with Marin from the start. One rainy Thursday afternoon, she stood in the art room, watching Noah help a smaller boy string beads for a bracelet. Across the hall, Marin and a few other kids were sprawled on the rug, piecing together a giant floor puzzle. There was no press here, no shareholders taking notes, just the quiet, unremarkable work of connection. It was in moments like this that Evelyn felt the deep shift inside herself. The title on her business card mattered less than the fact that she had a place where she was needed, and more than that, trusted. She had spent years defining herself by the jobs she lost or the ones she barely kept. Now, the value she carried wasn't in a position she could be fired from. It was in being the person who stayed. Adrian visited that day, his suit jacket draped over one arm, his expression tired but lighter. He walked the floor with her, listening as she explained the progress of each program. When they paused by the reading nook, Marin called out, waving a paper she had been guarding like a secret. "Evelyn, look." Marin ran over, holding a painting still damp at the edges. Bold strokes of blue and green filled the page, with a bright yellow figure in the center. "It's us," she said, pointing. "That's you, and that's me, and that's Noah over there." Evelyn bent down, smiling at the way the paint bled just enough to blur the lines. "You made us brighter than the sun," she said. "That's 'cause you are," Marin replied, simple as if naming the sky. Adrian watched from a step back, his eyes catching hers for a moment. There was gratitude there, and something steadier, an acknowledgement that the gamble he'd taken had already paid a kind of dividend the market couldn't measure. In the weeks ahead, there would be challenges. Funding to secure, critics to answer. Hard days when the work felt too slow. But standing in the bright hum of the new center, Evelyn felt the weight of the past month resolve into something she could carry. She was still here. Marin was laughing. Noah was safe. And Hartwell Dynamics, against the odds, was building a future that made room for more than profit. As Marin slipped her hand into Evelyn's, tugging her toward the wall to hang the painting, the sound of children's voices filled the space. For the first time in a long time, Evelyn wasn't thinking about what might be taken away. She was thinking about what was just beginning. The family day at the Lyra Initiative brought a kind of warmth the city's late autumn wind couldn't touch. The main hall was alive with chatter, the smell of fresh paint, and the rustle of paper as children moved between activities. On the far wall, a long white canvas stretched from one end to the other, a blank space waiting to become the wall of hope. Adrian stood with Marin and Noah at a table stocked with brushes, markers, and trays of bright paints. "What do you want put on there?" he asked, crouching so his eyes met Marin's. Marin didn't answer right away. She picked up a blue marker, twirling it in her fingers, then bent down and began to write in her careful, deliberate hand. "Thank you for staying." When she stepped back, she added a small sun above the words, its rays stretching toward the edges of the wall. Evelyn passed by just in time to see it. She didn't say anything, only smiled and rested a hand lightly on Marin's shoulder, letting the moment breathe. Later, Adrian found Evelyn near the coffee station, where a few parents were chatting. In his hand was a small envelope. "I've been meaning to give you this," he said, pulling out a glossy photo. The image showed him Marin and Noah at Bryant Park on that rainy day, the one Evelyn hadn't known he'd captured. Raincoats, damp hair, and the soft glow of the carousel lights in the background. "I almost deleted it," Adrian admitted. "Back then, I thought maybe it was better not to remember. But now," he glanced at the picture, his expression softening, "I think it's the start of all this." Evelyn studied the photo for a moment, her fingers brushing the corner. Funny how you can't always see the turning points until you've already walked past them. As the afternoon moved on, laughter rose from the craft tables, mingling with the thump of little feet running toward the playground. The center felt alive in a way that no board meeting could replicate. That was when the door near the reception opened quietly. A young woman stepped in, holding the hand of a small boy who looked no older than 4. Her posture was cautious, her eyes scanning the room as if gauging whether she truly belonged. She approached Evelyn with hesitant steps. "Is this a place for someone like us?" she asked in a voice so low it was almost lost in the background noise. Evelyn's answer came without hesitation. She smiled, warm and certain, and held the door wider. "It's for you. Come in." The boy peeked from behind his mother's leg, drawn by the sight of children playing just beyond the entrance. As they stepped inside, the afternoon light spilled through the doorway, stretching across the floor toward the wall of hope. Marin's words stood out in blue, the sun above them bright and steady. In that frame, the open door, the light, the hum of laughter, there was no question what the future of the Lyra Initiative would be. Not just programs or policies, but the choice to see people, to stay with them, and to keep building a family out of whoever walked through that door. In the end, this story isn't just about corporate power plays or stubborn boardrooms. It's about the quiet courage to stay when walking away might be easier. It reminds us that family can be built through choice, loyalty, and the willingness to truly see each other. So, what do you think? Does choosing to stay take more strength than leaving? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next story waiting to be told.